Texas, and I appreciate you all braving this treacherous Dallas weather to be here. And I think there's no more important place for us to be this morning is to discuss your Dallas County District Attorney candidates and what this means for you as a community and individually. Our Smart Justice campaign is designed to reduce mass incarceration by 50% and to address racial disparities in sentencing, in the criminal justice system, in everything that has to do with criminal justice. We refer to this campaign as Smart Justice rather than criminal justice reform because it doesn't make any assumptions about guilt or innocence when you come in contact with the system. It makes no assumptions about wealth or poverty or race or gender or any of those things. We are interested solely in fairness, and that's why we're here. I want to really take this moment to appreciate the staff and the effort that it took, and to thank our candidates, to thank our panelists. I also want you to know that ACLU of Texas is a nonpartisan organization. We are not endorsing or opposing any candidates, but we're here to give you the information that you need to make your decision. I also want you to know that both candidates were invited to this forum. One is missing, and I want you to understand that we reached out to District Attorney Faith Johnson weekly, sometimes daily, since February, inviting her to be here, talking to her staff, talking to her personally, and we are disappointed that she is not here, but we are going to proceed with our program as planned, and I'm going to turn it over to Dominique Walker to get us started. And again, I thank you all for your attendance.
So my name is Dominique Walker. I'm the Smart Justice Field Manager for the ACLU of Texas Smart Justice campaign. And we're all here because we care about criminal justice reform in Dallas. We're here because the district attorney is one of the most powerful positions in Dallas County. They choose whether or not to charge someone with a crime and which crimes to prosecute. They can decide who gets a second chance or who gets a death or prison sentence. And wrongful convictions, sending people with disabilities, mental illnesses, and addiction into our prison and jail system, racial disparities, unfair pretrial detention policies, all of these things drive the mass incarceration crisis we're in today. So the ACLU of Texas Smart Justice campaign, as it was stated, is dedicated to reducing mass incarceration and combating those racial disparities that exist within our system. So if you want to learn more about the ACLU of Texas or get our answers from our candidates on our questionnaire, you can go to dallasda.org. That's dallasda.org. If you have a question, we're going to be taking questions from the audience at the end of the program. You can fill out an index card in the back on the black table with black tablecloth and put your question in the box. As it was stated, the only candidate joining us here is the Honorable Judge Creuzot. We did reach out to Faith Johnson, who is our current district attorney, and she declined our invitation. So we're going to go over 4 sections with our advisory board members here. And so I want you guys to know that they're essential to this forum, but you guys are just as important. So we're going to ask for a little bit of audience participation. I'm going to ask a series of questions, and if the answer to any of these questions is yes, I just want you to raise your hand. So to start off, please raise your hand if you're here because you care about Dallas County's criminal justice system. Keep your hand raised if you know someone who has been impacted by Dallas County's criminal justice system. Thank you. Now I want everybody to raise your hand if you know someone who has been incarcerated. Keep your hand raised if that person is still incarcerated today. Thank you. So I want everyone to recognize that when we talk about things like mass incarceration and criminal justice reform, we're not talking about concepts. We're not talking about theory. We're talking about people in this community, people who live around us, our neighbors and our friends and our families. So I want to start off by introducing Roderick Johnson, who is one of our advisory board members. He's going to lead us into the first round of questions with Judge Creuzot.
All right. Thank you, Dominique. My name is Roderick Johnson, and I live here in Dallas County. And first, I want to ask Judge Creuzot to start off by telling us who you are and explain to the people here why you want to be the next Dallas County district.
Well, as you know, I'm John Creuzot. Is this on? I don't. I'm John Creuzot. Okay, yeah, I get real close. Okay, like in your mouth close. Anyway, I'm John Creuzot, and I am a retired state district judge. I was one of your judges for almost 22 years, And during that time, I recognized that there were disparities in the criminal justice system. And back in 1998, I began a program called the DIVERT program, which stands for Dallas Initiative for Expedited Rehabilitation and Treatment. And to make a long story short, it was a program that was 12 to 18 months. It focused on treatment. The person didn't have to plead guilty. It was not necessary that there be an indictment. It was a true diversion program. And after 18 months, if it took that long, they were graduated from the program. The case was dismissed and expunged. What we showed on that program was that treatment works and incarceration doesn't, okay? Because we had a 68% reduction in rearrest. And then we asked SMU Economics Department to do a study. And we showed that for every dollar spent just in avoided criminal justice costs, I'm not talking social improvements and things like that, but just avoided criminal justice costs, we had an avoidance of $9.34. We also started a reentry program for people who have been in and out of the system numerous times. In fact, they come down there to take more time because, in a way, they've become institutionalized, and the judges, the lawyers, everybody's kind of on the same track with them, okay? And we decided to put a stop to that and start another program called the reentry program. And what we did was we put them through treatment, and the divert court was on Tuesday nights, and this court was on Friday mornings. I personally supervised all of these people, and what we had was rearrest reduced and probation revocations reduced. And I want to be your next district attorney because I want to take every available method and every available avenue I can to end mass incarceration in Dallas County.
Thank you. What responsibility do you believe that the next Dallas County DA and prosecutors from and
You speak. You gotta get right into it.
okay.
Remember?
What responsibilities do you believe that the next Dallas County DA and prosecutors from across the state have to do to reduce mass incarceration?
Well, first of all, recognize that it exists, okay? Number one. Number two, take some responsibility, okay? And when I say take some responsibility, I mean come up with the fact that your office may be contributing to mass incarceration. And until we study that, and until we're open about it, and until we bring in outside experts to look at us, and I don't talk about us looking at us, I mean bringing in somebody from the outside, you're not going to have an honest answer. And once you get that answer, if you are in fact contributing to mass incarceration, then there needs to be a change of policies on a number of fronts, most likely, to impact that. And so that's what I think the next DA ought to do. That's what my campaign is focused on. You have some literature there. I'd invite you to go to my website, look at the literature, and I'd invite you, quite frankly, whether she's here or not, to go to my opponent's website and see where you can find mass incarceration, where you can find implicit bias, where you can find those kinds of things. And we'll talk more about that depending on the questions. But I'm very clear, I'm very certain, and I'm very precise as to what this campaign is about and what the future of the Dallas County DA's office is about.
Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
I'm going to ask those of you in the audience today, if you know someone with a mental health disorder, if you could raise your hand. Yeah. And also raise your hand if you know someone with a substance abuse disorder. Yep. Thank you. You can all put your hands down. But I was incarcerated for 10 years in Texas for nonviolent crime. And I was never offered any alternatives to incarceration, such as drug treatment or mental health programs. So I was definitely affected by the negative effects of mass incarceration. And see, Judge Crusoe helped start, like he just explained to us, the divert courts here in Dallas County. For those of you who don't know and understand the divert courts, but it's a Dallas initiative for diversion and expedited rehabilitation and treatment. The goal of the divert court is to return sober, law-abiding citizens to the community and thereby close the revolving door that has went on for too long in the criminal justice system. If this court was to truly serve its purpose, we would be able to reduce the rate of recidivism in Dallas dramatically. The most recent 2018 physical divert court report said it had 82 admissions and 36 graduates. So how do we increase the number of people, Judge Cruzo, who are serving in this court and continue to measure its success?
First of all, I haven't run the court in many years, and we've had a couple of changes, and we've had a lot of changes in staff, okay? And that will affect your outcomes. If the staff is not properly trained, and if the staff is not properly supervised, it's like any other business, okay? It's like the bank. You take all the tellers away and put some brand new tellers in, you're gonna get some different outcomes, right? Money will be missing, not that they stole it, but whatever. And so divert court has had a lot of turnover, and I'm sure that that has had a bearing on the outcomes. The other thing is that, and it's not run by me, okay? And so I can't tell you specifically what is wrong, but I can tell you one thing, that 82 in and 36 out on just the face of it doesn't look good, but I don't know how many are still in and how many total are in, and that's what you would need to know, okay? So you don't know the rate that they were taken in, and you don't know the rate that they graduated. And when you say 36 out, I don't know, does that mean 36 people graduated?
36 people graduated.
There, okay, well, that, you know, it depends on the fluctuation of the population as to how that looks, okay? But just on the surface, it doesn't look good, okay? So obviously, I think that one of the things that we would need to do, divert court is just like everything else. It needs to be assessed. Divert court needs a process evaluation, which is something that is common, and that is look at what you say you're doing and measure whether you're doing what you say you're doing. If you're not, then there are problems with the program, okay? That's the first thing. Okay, the next thing is to make certain that when you have the change of personnel, that each and every one is trained for the mission of divert court so that they understand what their responsibilities are, which is to graduate someone successfully from the program. And I can't tell you what's going on because I'm not there, but these numbers concern me.
All right. Thank you, Judge Cruzo. In your written response to the ACLU of Texas General Election Questionnaire, you said that your goal is to reduce Dallas County State Jail and prison admissions by 15 to 20% within a 4-year period. So this means 845 to 1,127 people based on the 2016 numbers. Is this your understanding of commitment? And will you commit here in person to the goal that you wrote down in that questionnaire?
Well, when I wrote this questionnaire, I committed to it because I wasn't playing around, number one, and I'm not afraid to answer the question, number two. And number three, I knew that you were going to publicize it, so. So, I mean, let's get down to business, okay? Yeah. It wasn't like this is going to be some hidden piece of paper somewhere. But, yes, I'm serious about it. And, in fact, to be honest with you, I had a hard time coming up with that number, and I played it a little safe, okay, to be honest with you, because I don't know systemically all the things that can be changed within the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. I can tell you that I'm currently working with partners outside of Dallas and in Dallas who can help assess each one of the units inside the District Attorney's Office. Also, we need to assess each and every one of these programs that we have, diversion programs. Excuse me. But let me explain something to you. We will not end mass incarceration by increasing diversion programs. The diversion programs currently cover about 2% of the people. Even if you double that, you're talking 4%. That's not enough. Okay? Some of the other things that I wrote in my answer is, for example, on probation revocation motions, on felony offenses or misdemeanors. All of this stuff about not paying fees and not doing community service and having a dirty UA, when I become the district attorney, if there are things in there that don't impact public safety, they will be removed from the motion to revoke probation. And that in and of itself will have a significant bearing on the number of people who go to state jails and prisons for nonsense. Am I clear? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Nobody's talking about that anywhere in the country or in this state. But the fact of the matter is, if you've absconded or you've committed a new offense, put it in there, litigate it, and let the judge decide. If not, I will not participate in sending someone to prison who poses no threat to this community.
All right, thank you. Well, I actually want to thank you, Judge Cruzo, for answering my questions. And I'll turn it back over to our director, Dominique.
So roughly 70 people who are in our jails have not yet been convicted of a crime. They're not there because they're a flight risk or because they're a threat to their society. They're there simply because they cannot afford to pay a cash bail. So I'm going to turn it over to our next advisory board member, Sharon Robbins, who's going to take us through some questions on our cash bail system.
Thank you, Dominique. My name is Sharon Robbins, and I was directly affected by our Dallas County cash bail system when I was a 23-year-old single mom and college student. I was headed to school for exams one evening and was pulled over for what I found out later was an old traffic ticket. I was forced to come up with $500 that I did not have. I'm going to ask the audience to raise your hand if you would struggle to find the money to pay hundreds to thousands of dollars today as a requirement for your cash bail. Thank you. You may lower your hands. Our cash bail system is unconstitutional and doesn't work because it's illogical to think that any one person is going to have a lump sum of money at any given time to afford their freedom until trial. The typical person is working paycheck to paycheck, paying for child care, paying for medical, food, and shelter. That money that suddenly has to be taken away from the entire household is thrust into the criminal justice system. It doesn't just affect that individual. This affects the family, which affects the community, and in turn affects Dallas as a whole. It's 2018, and we're still talking about the fact that some people cannot afford their freedom. Judge Cruzo, what steps will your office take to end money bail in Dallas County?
Number one, we could have made a lot of progress before today on this if we had myself as district attorney and not Faith Johnson. When the lawsuit was filed, Faith Johnson had an opportunity to file an answer. And I have the answer here, and I'm not going to go through all 28 pages of it because it's very boring legal stuff, okay? However, I can get to the bottom of it. And the last paragraph says, wherefore premises considered, which means all the 28 or something pages before it, Dallas County prays that this court will grant this motion, a motion to dismiss. You understand me? Make it go away and dismiss plaintiffs' claims against it with prejudice, which means they can't ever bring it again. That plaintiffs take nothing from it by this suit, which means go away and don't come back. And other prospective injunctive release against it be denied in all respects. Don't ever come back, okay? That it recover its costs. In other words, pay the already paid Dallas County attorneys and any other relief to which it might be justly entitled. Had I been your district attorney, this would not have been filed. Okay? We would have said that the current system is unconstitutional, that it's unconstitutional because it keeps people in jail who are poor and don't have money, who are not a risk to abscond. And we would have started cooperating with the court instead of fighting the court, and we would have gotten this injunctive relief a lot earlier, and we would have been thinking through the problem with our district and county judges who deserve to be recognized for the hard work that they've done on this. But this is the kind of nonsense that goes on, okay, and then claim I'm all for bond reform, when in fact the truth is this is what you filed. It's unconstitutional. I'm going to change the direction of the district attorney's office, and we're going to work on getting true bail bond reform in Dallas County.
Okay, thank you. And that kind of falls in line with my next question. We understand that ending the cash bail system will not happen overnight. and we know that implementing an evidence-based pretrial system will take time. But until those major steps are taken, will you commit to recommending release for all defendants on PR bonds unless there's a real evidence that they are flight risk or a danger to the community?
The answer is yes. In fact, let's just get busy and start talking about some things we're going to do. Number one, I have promised that on less than 4 ounces of marijuana cases, you don't even need to worry about a bond because we're not prosecuting those if it's a first offense. Okay? If you're coming in on simple criminal trespass and you're not a threat to anybody, you're most likely homeless, why are we going through even a PR bond which holds you in jail until we can get that processed? We're not going to prosecute those cases. We're going to get down to some serious business, okay? Some serious business of looking at what we do, what's right and what's wrong, and we're going to get down day one to fixing what's wrong, okay, and trying to get what's right done better if we can. Okay, so this whole thing of ending cash bail, we can just eliminate that on some cases completely. The reality of it is, and this is a misnomer, and I want you all to understand, there will be bonds set on cases. What we're talking about is if you're not a threat to abscond, if you're not a threat to commit a new offense, if you're not a threat to commit a violent offense, then you should go home and come back to court. The Texas Constitution requires that a bond be set on the vast majority of cases, so there will be bonds set or they'll be reversed by the Court of Appeals. So we're not going to end cash bond, okay? We're not going to end the bail bond system, but what we're going to do is focus on risk assessment, as you mentioned, and we're going to take care of the fact that there's a lot of people there who can be released. And when we do that, we should reduce jail population, and we should reduce jail costs, which means we reduce tax costs, and maybe we can invest that money into things like treatment for the substance abuse people and the mentally ill.
Thank you.
I'm glad you think I make sense. Somebody does. Finally.
Thank you again. I'm going to hand it back over to Dominique.
Okay, so back to the audience. Raise your hand if you know someone or if you personally have ever dealt with a case that the DA touched.
What the what?
That the DA touched, that a district
DA,
attorney has
wow.
touched.
Yeah.
Keep your hand raised if you feel the process with the DA's office was explained in a way that you fully understood. Our elected district attorney needs to be willing to communicate with the community in order to understand how their office's decisions affect us. So it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Miles, who will be heading up the next section of questions on transparency.
Thank you, Ms. Dominique.
Speak a lot. You got to speak right into it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All
It's
right.
working now.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominique. And thank you, Judge Cruzo, for coming out and weathering this storm with us. My name is Richard Miles, and I live in Dallas County. When Craig Watkins created the Conviction Integrity Unit, the original intent was to look into cases of wrongful conviction. Without adding anything to it, we need to make sure the Conviction Integrity Unit is progressive, right, and consistent. How should the Conviction Integrity Unit success be measured, and what will you do to improve it?
So I made a statement one time that you made a comment on, and your comment was correct, by the way.
Thank you.
I made a statement that I thought the Conviction Integrity Unit should, I think I phrased it wrong. I said be over the appellate section and the trial section, and your comment was that's too much, and it's a defocusing of its position. And you are correct, except I worded it poorly. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So I want to apologize for that. I haven't seen you and spoken to you about that.
Yes, sir. Thank
So, yeah. So, well, that's why we're here, right?
you. Yes, sir.
So what I think is there is a national entity on innocence projects, okay? And they have a set of best standards. And to my knowledge, I have never heard that our current district attorney has read them or adopted them, okay? I plan to read them, which I've already done, and I plan to adopt them. And I plan to keep that a narrow focus that reports to me. But let me tell you what I meant by my other statements. They were poorly worded, okay? For example, if there is an issue in a pending case about the integrity of the district attorney's conduct, why wouldn't we take it to the conviction integrity unit to make certain that we are keeping a close eye on the conduct, okay? The other thing is the appellate section is there to ensure that a conviction stays a conviction. That's a different mission from the conviction integrity unit, and what I have seen is that they get crosswise. And what I would do would see to it and demand and put in place procedures that the conviction integrity unit's view supersedes the appellate section's view. So when I said that, I didn't mean that they're going to be running all this stuff, but just that they're going to have the most important opinion and report directly to me. Doesn't mean I'll necessarily always agree, but I've had cases, I don't have time to go into the details, where that has been a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you most definitely for that answer and your explanation. I personally served 15 years for a crime that I did not commit. One common issue in these cases of wrongful conviction is prosecutors improperly withholding evidence of information that may prevent a wrongful conviction based on incorrect determinations of the immaterial or not being exculpatory. Will you commit to making sure there is a full disclosure from the arresting records to the investigative notes of detectives and lawyers presented to both parties before trial?
The answer is yes, and let me explain something that's not in your answer that only a practitioner like myself or a victim like yourself would understand, so that everybody else understands, okay? We have a problem in this community. The police turn over what they want to, when they want to, okay, on a certain time basis, so the defense can see it or not. I have suffered through that with cases set before the grand jury. It dribbles in. I haven't gotten to it yet. And all of a sudden, the grand jury date is coming, and it's getting there, and right before it gets there, you may or may not get all the information. And the problem is the DA's office is required to give it to you, but they claim, not my fault, I don't have it. No, you are law enforcement. You are the state of Texas, and so are they. And so we will have a written policy with each and every police agency that they will turn over each and every piece of information upon its immediate acceptance or collection by them to the district attorney's office so we can get this done. The other thing is, there doesn't seem to be much of a policy about what to do about a district attorney who intentionally withholds evidence in a case. We have a court ruling in this county. The trial was not under Ms. Johnson's administration, but the ruling was that this person intentionally withheld evidence from the defense, and it caused a mistrial. In fact, it's a very well-written appellate opinion on it. The man's name is Demas, D-E-A-M-U-S, if you want to go look it up, okay? That person still works at the DA's office, okay? I promise you, day one, no one who has been held to intentionally withhold evidence, to hide it, or anything else will work under my administration. Okay?
Thank you, Judge Cruzo. My last and final question. Can you give us an idea of who you plan on engaging and how you plan on engaging innocence organizations, impacted communities, and reentry organizations to work with your office to end mass incarceration?
Well, that's a big, big question. You know, there are so many entities who are calling me right now, and I keep trying to remind them I ain't won any election.
Right.
Okay?
Preparation.
Well, whatever. Hillary Clinton was getting prepared, too, and look where she is. So, you know, I mean, let's be realistic.
Right.
Okay? And I'm going to be honest with you. There are several outside national organizations, and I can't even remember all of their names, that we have been discussing. At least I'm trying to keep them from discussing it. I'm trying to keep my eye on the prize, okay, which is November 6th, not November 7th. But there are entities out there, some I'm not familiar with but have talked to, some I am familiar with and have worked with. We have other models across the state that seem to be working well on some issues, especially on mass incarceration and reducing the incarceration of African American men and women. Nobody has talked about the rising rate of incarceration of women in this state and across this nation. Nobody's talked about that, even to me or anybody else. I don't know if you keep up with my Facebook page, but I recently put out a piece on that. In fact, it was in one of the newspapers. Yeah. So I actually send out, the morning news doesn't report anything I send to them. So anyway, I send it, well, whatever. So they don't even tell me why. They just say rejected. So what I do, if you keep up with our African American newspapers, I submit my articles to them because they'll report them. And so to answer your question is there are lots of things on the burner, okay? But to be honest with you, I'm willing and committed to working with them, but I think it's premature to get into that because November 6th ain't got here yet, and I'm focused on that.
All right. Point well taken. Thank you. I turn you back into the hands of Ms. Dominique.
So earlier I asked how many of you know someone who has dealt with a case that the district attorney has touched. But now I want to ask you to raise your hand if you yourself or anyone you know has actually spoken with the district attorney. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to someone who has. One of our next advisory board members, Chaz Rogers.
Thank you, Dominique. My name is Chaz Rogers. I live in Dallas County. My life was affected when my son was murdered in unsubstantiated evidence in 2011. I've spoken with 3 DAs over 7 years about my son's murder case and still have not received all the open records requested. The way the DA office is structured directly affects how well it serves its community. Judge Cruzo, how will your office commit to transparency for the constituents and families of people who are accused of alleged crimes during their case proceedings?
Well, first of all, there's a victims' rights statute that allows you certain rights and to be notified of certain things. However, it doesn't go so far as providing all the paperwork on a case. I don't know if you know this, but there is a portal on Dallas County where many documents pertaining to a case are filed, the actual documents themselves. Dallas County's portal is actually way ahead of just about any other counties in the state of Texas that I know of. But let me ask you a question. When you say unsubstantiated evidence, what do you mean by that?
Unsupported.
So your son is charged or your son was killed?
He was murdered.
He was murdered. And so what do you mean by murdered and there is unsubstantiated evidence? Do you mean that they don't feel there's enough evidence to go forward? Is that what you mean?
Evidence was not presented. It was withheld, suppressed evidence.
Who suppressed it?
Judge Mark Stokes.
Okay, so there was a motion to suppress and the judge granted the suppression of certain amounts of evidence.
I'm assuming so.
Okay, so has the case been tried or not?
Yes, it has.
Okay, and what was the outcome?
There was someone charged, but the evidence didn't support that he was the one that murdered him.
Okay, so it was a not guilty? Is that what you're telling me?
They said he was guilty.
Of something other than murder?
Manslaughter.
Manslaughter, okay. So that's a lesser included offense. But, so I think certainly after the case is over, you're entitled to it. But I think that you have a right to be informed of the progress of the case and what facts are available to them as the case goes along. You have a right to that. I don't think you have a right to take possession of the documents and things like that because it may compromise the integrity of the case. So as district attorney, your question is, what would I do? I would ensure that all of your rights as a crime victim or the relative of a crime victim are recognized and fulfilled.
Thank you, Judge Cruzo.
Okay.
My second question is, a lot of this work will actually be done by your prosecutors and other people who work for you. Will you make sure that the prosecutors are evaluated and promoted based on their conviction rate, but they are not evaluated, or at least in part, on how much they reduce mass incarceration, racial disparities, and recidivism in our criminal justice system.
You know, so I think what you're wanting to know, if I'm understanding you correctly, is will we look at reducing mass incarceration as opposed to conviction rate? Is that what you're asking me?
That's correct.
Okay. And the answer is yes and yes.
Okay.
Okay? Let me explain something to you. You can't have a trial lawyer who doesn't know how to try a case.
Correct.
You have to have a trial section where you try cases, okay? And you have to have trial lawyers who know how to win the case. If not, they probably ought not be a what? Trial what? Lawyer. Maybe a book lawyer or a research lawyer. So to a certain extent, conviction and skill in trial will always be part of the assessment. But an individual's reduction of mass incarceration, what we need are system-wide policies, okay? Because the problem with the system is, especially under this current system, is there are no policies. And so what it's left to is to the discretion of individual prosecutors as to how they're going to handle cases. We need leadership. We need somebody who recognizes there's a problem and who has dealt with this type of problem and who has been successful in dealing with this, to the extent that the philosophical underpinning of closing 8 prisons came from divert court and reentry court. And that's what we need, is somebody who's going to set policies and see to it that the prosecutors, each individual prosecutor, follows those policies. That's how we track that. If they're doing something outside of that, through our research or looking at files or the things that we need to do, then either they need to change or they need to go. They need to make a decision. And I'm very clear about that. It's either change or go.
Thank you, Judge Cruzo. This is my last and final question. You have been on the campaign trail now for over 1 year.
No, been over 2 years.
Okay. Okay, over 2 years.
I was 2 inches taller when I started this, but anyway, go ahead.
How do you feel your views on criminal justice reform have changed during this time? And can you elaborate on some of your ideals that have evolved and what led you to this evolution?
You know, I don't think my ideas have changed. I think the way I express them have changed, okay? So back in 1996, I'll give you an example. Harris County, the Houston Chronicle did a study. If you were an African-American male and you had a court-appointed lawyer and you had a low-level drug case, a felony, you were going to the pen. You were going to state jail. You weren't getting any probation, okay? That's what led me to do divert court.
Okay.
So we didn't use the word mass incarceration back then.
Right.
We didn't use the word criminal justice reform back then,
Right.
okay? But the fact of the matter is, I had to adjust how I spoke about what I was doing, okay? So I would put at the end of the sentence, when you close 8 prisons, you have in fact begun the process of ending mass incarceration. What I needed to do, and I have done, is said we need to end mass incarceration, et cetera, and we've done these certain things, and we've ended up by closing 8 prisons. So it's not that my views have changed, it's the way I have communicated them have changed, okay? I mean, when you do what I've done, and you've done it for 20 years, you've got national awards, you're in the Drug Court Hall of Fame. When you have a judicial award, I didn't bring it, but it's a big give it, and judges want it. It's the Judge John C. Cruzo Award for courage and vision and leadership in drug court reform. Okay. When you are the person who developed the philosophical underpinning for closing 8 prisons, you know, I may not have said it the right way, but the fact is you can't take that away. Those are facts, okay? And so if I have not said it as accurately and as directly as I have, that's on me. I own it, okay? And I'll do everything I can to be a better communicator in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Back over to Dominique.
So the next set, mic went down. So the next set of questions is going to come from our community groups and a couple of our community partners here, and we're so thankful and proud for you guys to be here. So I want us to lift them up with a round of applause, and thank you guys for coming. So our first question is going to come from Dr. Jerry Christian with Kirkwood CME. If you can come up and address Judge Creuzot.
Yeah.
My name is Dr. Jerry Christian. I am the chairperson for the Coalition of Concerned Pastors, which make up about 50 congregations in this city. And we also partner with the IMA as well as the Panhellenic Council and some other groups to make sure that we get out to vote and do what we need to do in this particular election. I've known Judge Creuzot for quite some time now. To ask you this question, Judge, no matter what type of drug court intervention or community supervision or conditional dismissal, pretrial diversion program with the expungement program you adopt, which most African American minorities crimes are not that's a word.
I think so.
Okay. The fact of the matter is that all of those are programs that require people to get arrested and have handcuffs slapped on their wrists before they can get help for a drug problem. Arrests for drug possessions are highly discriminatory, and they are skyrocketing in Dallas County and in Texas. So my question is, what are you going to do to end this unjust practice of excessive arrest and ensure people in Dallas County can get help for drug problem instead of handcuffs?
So some of your problem is not a district attorney problem, it's a municipal problem. We have a law that allows for cite and release, okay? The problem is only one municipality in the county has adopted it, and it's adopted it only for marijuana cases less than 4 ounces. But a recent Dallas Morning News study showed that in communities of color, they're not doing it. Okay? So here we go again. Okay? We're having two standards. And the city council and the police need to address that. But one of the things, to answer your question, that I would do is I would do everything I could to ensure, as best I could, I can't make police agencies and municipalities adopt cite and release, but it would be a priority of mine to certainly encourage them to do so, number one. Number two, what do we do about excessive incarceration? Number one, I think and I believe in, prior to being placed on probation, a person should go through a rigorous assessment process, not only for risk to reoffend, but also screening for alcohol, drugs, and mental health. And I think that that should be done before they're placed on probation, so that at the time that they're placed on probation, a plan is in place. In past times, we did not have that system. We had a system where it was done up to 120 days after they were placed on probation. When we changed the system, we reduced technical violations by 59%, okay? Well, if you don't have a technical violation, you don't have a warrant for your arrest, and you don't go to jail, and you don't risk going to state jail or pen. So there are things out there that we have done that have been shown to be effective. The problem is once again, we get new judges and new staff and this, that, and the other, and we get lost. We need to get refocused. And that's why I think it's important for me to be the next district attorney, so we can get refocused on these issues and make these policy issues and train everybody, every stakeholder on it, so that we stay focused on what are the things that we need to do to end mass incarceration, regardless of whether it's a drug case or anything else. There are lots of other cases that we can deal with, that people have drug and alcohol problems that we don't even include in there, and just because we don't do it.
Thank you. Let me just express my sincere thanks to you for helping me personally when my son was arrested at Texas A&M Commerce. And even though it took almost a year, you helped me so much by helping to get that expunged and off his record, because he was just being a typical college student and got arrested for nonsense.
Sure. That happens a lot.
Thank you. So next I want to invite the Texas Coalition to abolish the death penalty, and we have a representative, Paula Keith, here to ask her question.
Thank you. My name's Paula Keith, and I live in Dallas.
Hello.
County. In recent years, the Supreme Court has determined that juvenile offenders and people who suffer from intellectual disabilities are exempt from the death penalty. Yet capital offenders with severe mental illness are still eligible for execution. In the last legislative session, Dallas Representative Tony Rose introduced legislation that would exempt the severely mentally ill from being executed in Texas. As Dallas's next district attorney, would you refrain from seeking the death penalty for mentally ill defendants? And will you publicly support legislative efforts to exempt the mentally ill from execution?
Well, so let's talk about the term mental illness. That could be something very mild or moderate or severe. It could be anxiety, well, it could be depression. There are any number of things. So let's try to, if we can, and I think with your agreement, let's focus that on something that's serious, okay, as opposed to mild. So what we're talking about here, and I think we all agree on, is somebody with an intellectual disability or severe mental illness, like PTSD, okay, that's to an extreme extent, should not be tried for death. And I generally agree with that. Okay, there was a question, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at it. The question here in the questionnaire didn't really touch on that part, okay? But I can tell you this, there was a recent trial in Dallas County where a veteran was tried, and this district attorney's office sought to have him executed, and he suffered from severe PTSD, and the jury rejected that, okay? There have only been in each one of the last 3 years, 3 death penalties given in the state of Texas. The death penalty's on the way out. And there's no sense in playing around about that. But it's my understanding that the current district attorney's office has another death penalty case that they're working on. So it seems as though we're coming back to the death penalty under this administration as opposed to going away from it. I can tell you, as your district attorney, I have stated what I think are the proper criteria, if at all. Number one, that person, when we talk about a continuing threat to society, that means either outside or inside. If that person has a life sentence, they're inside. So continuing threat to me means that they would be a threat to either the personnel or other inmates, a serious threat to their health, well-being, and their lives inside the penitentiary. Outside of that, I wouldn't consider a death sentence.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Paula. So next I want to invite the Red-Handed Warrior Society up, and I'm going to invite Leroy Pena to address the judge.
Red-headed or red-handed?
Red-handed.
Oh, I thought you said red-headed. Where's your
Good
red
morning,
hair?
Judge.
Good morning.
My name is Leroy Pena. I'm the National Director of the Red-Handed Warrior Society.
Yes.
I'm also a member of the Lipan Apache Tribe of Texas. Now, the gentleman right here, he asked one of my questions already, so that's already answered. But are you familiar with Mark Gonzales, the District Attorney of Nueces County, which is mostly Corpus Christi?
I am familiar. I don't know him. I've never met him, but I know of him.
Okay,
I know of his many tattoos.
Yeah, he implemented a policy in Corpus Christi in that offenders that had minor marijuana possession were no longer jailed but given fines. And what's happening is the jail population has decreased and the revenue through the fines have increased for the county.
Right.
So they're actually paying their fines, the offenders and everything, so it's creating revenue. But he's even taking like whatever they can pay, you know what I mean? So, and that's a pretty good thing because a lot of us can't afford to put down $50, $100, whatever. But he's taking very small payments as long as you pay something and you keep it, consistent.
Sure.
So would you be interested in implementing a policy here in Dallas County?
No.
No?
No. I said I'm not going to prosecute the case at all.
Okay, that's good. But the ones that are already being assessed these fines that before you take office, would you be able to do something about that?
The first day I take office, any pending case of marijuana first-time offender under 4 ounces will be dismissed.
Okay, that's very good. because that's what we're trying to do now is that I want to see if the area here, the area district attorneys can work with the state about creating a program for the inmates that are being paroled and they're not, nobody's hiring them because of their record. Some kind of a retraining, rehabilitation.
Let me stop you. Let me stop you and cut you short because I can get your answer that you want. Okay. So I'm chair of the board of Unlocking Doors, and Doors is with all caps, and we are what we call a reentry system, and we're actually seeking inmates coming out of the penal system, and we have an assessment process, and we have a referral process to services, and we are showing a very high reduction in rearrest and recidivism. So there are others around the state. Many churches are doing it. For example, Potter's House is doing it. They have the Tory program, which has a lot of success. And if we can replicate that, one of the things that is true about all the ones that are working very well is they're evidence-based, which means they're based on research. Now, let me go back to Mr. What's his last name in Nueces?
His name is Mark Gonzales.
Mr. Gonzales. Okay, Mr. Gonzales, I think, has been licensed to practice law for 10 years, and I've been licensed to practice for 36. And so our experiences are different, okay? And so I think that working with him, we can probably go beyond what he wants to do. I think his ideas compared to his predecessor are very good. But if I'm elected, let's not assume anything, then I look forward to working with him to maybe even go beyond what it is that he proposes.
Yeah, and it says a lot that you took the time to be here, and I really appreciate that, and it shows that you believe that the public is worth the effort to come out here, and it's worth your time to come out here and speak to us. Now, the other, the incumbent is not here, and that says a lot also.
Well,
just wanted to say that.
Actually, she will, I'll go ahead and take up for her. She will tell you that she has been to 900 and something meetings, okay? The only problem is I haven't heard any policy at any of those meetings. So it's nice to show up and kumbaya, but when it comes down to policy, we're kind of short on that. So, but she has been to a lot of community meetings. I can give you that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I haven't been to 900 and something.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leroy. So now I want to invite Change with Action, which is a Dallas affiliate of Color of Change. I'm going to invite Ms. Tierra to come up and address Judge Creuzot.
Hello, Judge.
Hello.
Thank you.
You need to hold that closer.
The question I have for you is, when it comes to egregious acts of police misconduct and or brutality, such as in the case of Botham John, how do you plan to ensure no preferential treatment is given to our peace officers who are being prosecuted for violating their responsibility to protect and to serve?
Have you seen the piece that I wrote on that?
No, sir, I have not.
Okay, well, I keep hating to say go to Facebook page and look at it, but go to my Facebook page and look at it. So all of this stuff about manslaughter, okay? I have tried many, many murder cases, and I understand the law on murder. So what I did in that piece was try to explain the law on murder, and then I explained the law on manslaughter, and I looked at the facts as we knew them from the newspaper and suggested that that's not a manslaughter case, that it is, in fact, a murder case, okay? Number one. Number two, how she was treated. It is suggested from the facts that she was treated differently. If Botham Jean had walked into her apartment under the same circumstances and shot and killed her, I guarantee you he would not have turned himself in at the Kaufman County Jail. Okay? Let's be honest. I can tell you what would have happened to him. He would have been taken down to Dallas Police Headquarters. He'd have been put in a room. He'd have been taken down there in cuffs. Now, they were taking him down there in cuffs, and he would have gone down there, and he would have had a tape on him, and they would have given him his Miranda rights, and if he decided to invoke them, they would have done everything they could to talk him out of it, okay? Whether he went along with that or not. This whole thing about waiting 72 hours, okay, came from a case several years ago where an officer claimed somebody lunged at him with a knife, except, security camera says no. So they implemented that, and then they unimplemented that, and I am told that they didn't really implement it, they just said that. And it appears that this officer got the benefit of that. There's nothing that the district attorney can do about police policy on that. And in fact, whether or not she got 72 hours to do whatever, to be honest with you, may or may not even come up in a trial. It may not have anything to do with the facts of walking inside the door, etc.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So our last community question was given to us by Elliot Thomas with Next Level Black Thought. His question is, 1 in 3 black boys can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. Statistically, black boys specifically are prosecuted more harshly.
Excuse me, African American men, not just boys.
His question is about young black boys specifically.
Okay, all right.
The long-term effects of mass incarceration lead to hindrances in their working careers and life in general. How will you advocate for the DA's office to better assess cases involving young black males, giving them a second chance and an opportunity to properly assess the person as opposed to just their crime?
So that's an interesting question. So we talk about divert court and all these programs, and I've already stated to you that you can double these programs and you're not going to have a significant impact on mass incarceration, okay? One of the things that we don't do is we include drug cases and things like that, but we don't in these programs, but we don't include burglary, or we don't include theft, and we don't include robbery, okay? And we don't include other types of cases where the person may have committed the case for the same exact reason they may have been in possession of drugs, which is they have a drug problem. And so what we need to do is start looking at what are the reasons that young men, African American or otherwise, are committing crimes, okay, and stop playing a game because it's this offense versus that offense, and get down to treating the underlying problem, okay? And we may have to really impact people of color and mass incarceration. We may have to set up a different system to funnel them into to do that, to have the impact. Okay, we cannot rely on court-appointed lawyers to get it done all the time. Okay, we can't do that. We can't rely on the judges who've been doing the same thing over and over to get it done. The system needs to change. We need leadership who is willing to stand up and say, I will no longer do this. Either you're with me or not. And we need that. And I'll give you an example. In Houston, there's called a rapid intervention court where people are brought right after arrest. And oftentimes they're people with long criminal records who are African American, people of color, okay, and they're taken to a certain judge who has a certain process. And even if they don't want to go through it, he is trained, okay, to motivate them to take a chance on treatment and probation so we can keep them from getting back in the system, getting those technical violations I talked about, and going back to the pen again. But it's going to have to be bold, okay? It's going to have to be decisive, and it's going to take leadership and not fright or being afraid of getting reelected to get this done.
So the last community member I'm going to invite up to speak is Tyrone Day, and he's going to tell a little bit about his story and ask you a question.
Okay?
How you doing, Mr. Cruz?
Is that your number on you?
Yes, sir.
All right.
My name is Tyrone Day.
Hello, Mr. Day.
I was wrongfully convicted in this community here. I served 26 years and a half and 15 days, day for day. Here recently, in the last 3 months, I was considered cleared all the way on DNA by the
Congratulations.
formerly DA office. But my question is it's been 3 months and I'm still on hold with that. So my question is, how would you as the DA prevent the delaying of justice after the evidence and the DA, District Attorney, Integrity Unit investigation has completely excluded the wrongfully convicted person?
So let me ask you a question in order to answer your question. Have you had a formal declaration of innocence given to you?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, first of all, that needs to happen, and I don't know why that would be hung up. It sounds to me that if you are cleared by DNA, that should have happened by now. Mm-hmm. Okay, there are numerous people who have to sign off on that, the DA, the judge, okay, and then they send it to the comptroller, okay, and then the comptroller has to go through his or her process, but I don't know why, based on what you told me, that hasn't happened. I can tell you that if it were me and if everything is clear, okay, if this is a DNA case and it's clear that you would not commit the offense, we will work on that immediately, not have you waiting around for your declaration of innocence so then you can send it into the comptroller's office. Am I right, Mr. Miles? That's the process? Okay.
Yes, sir. And I have one more question. What would you do as a district attorney to expedite the investigation of more wrongful convictions that are investigated by a Dallas County Integrity Unit?
Well, that's what, so your question goes back to what I was saying earlier, okay? I have read over the national standards for conviction integrity units, and, you know, what I don't know, because I don't have a way of knowing it because I'm on the outside instead of the inside, is there a backlog? How large is it? And what will it take to tackle it? Okay, I do not know, all right? But let's talk about one of the things I talked about. If we, you know, there was an analysis done of the DA's office a few years ago that they have too many prosecutors, okay? If that's true, and if I become DA and we take certain categories of cases that we're no longer going to prosecute, we may really have too many prosecutors, okay? Yes. And then we can do something like called reassign them to the conviction integrity unit if they have the skills to do that. Or we certainly don't have to go out and worry about a grant and a this and a that and wait 8 months, 9 months, or not get it or get it. We have people, or we have the funds where we can hire the appropriate people to do it. And I'll give you an example. Mr. Krasner up in Philadelphia, it's my understanding, and Mr. Miles, you may correct me if I'm wrong, you may know better. My understanding is he said he wants to increase that unit to 10 lawyers. And we may have to do something like that here, but I'll be aggressive on it, I can tell you that. We're not going to play around with it.
Yes, sir.
You can look at me and tell that already, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you, Tyrone. So now we are going to get into our audience questions. I'm going to invite our advisory board member, Keisha Pope Nixon, is going to moderate that section.
Thank you, Dominique. Again, my name is Keisha Nixon, and I live in the city of DeSoto. We are the community of Dallas County, and it is our job as constituents to press candidates on the issues that affect and matter to us. And then it is our job to hold those elected officials accountable when they're elected into office. We appreciate you being here today, Judge Cruzo. Faith Johnson's absence does speak volumes. Now, on to the matter at hand. Our first audience question is, our Republican DA, Faith Johnson, has accepted $60,000 from one of Donald Trump's major donors. How can a DA guarantee they are nonpartisan after being elected when they accept that kind of money from a donor?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Well, so, I mean, you say nonpartisan, let's look at, I mean, and I'm trying to be serious about this, okay? I mean, what are her stances? Don't they sound like all those same kind of rhetoric? I mean, what have you heard her say about mass incarceration? What have you heard her say about implicit bias? She'll tell you about all the meetings she's been to, okay? And I'm serious. So I don't know. I don't know how you miss the major issue of criminal justice reform and the people that are giving you the money are Donald Trump supporters who hired Jeff Sessions, who thinks we ought to go back to mandatory minimums and build more private prisons. It seems to be kind of like a political lineage there. And I don't know how to answer that. I think it's up to the integrity of the person, but if the person today, regardless who they're taking money from, and not talking about issues that affect this community and affect what's wrong in the criminal justice system, I don't care what you look like. If you're white and poor, okay, you get the same treatment. I'm just telling you. It doesn't really matter. It just so happens that it affects us more. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's a question of courage. It's a question of not worrying about getting elected or being elected. Okay, and it's a question about what your policies are, more important than who your donors are. I mean, that's the best I can do with it. I don't know.
Okay.
I wish she was here so you could ask her, but you know, she ain't here, so.
No, she's not, apparently. Okay. All right. Counties with the most successful restorative justice programs do not put people in cages, but instead treat people with dignity and respect and address the root causes. Will you be able to speak to the issue of transforming our system from punitive to restorative justice?
Will I be able to speak to what? Say that again.
Be able to speak to the issue of transforming our system from punitive to restorative?
Yes, absolutely. So let's take why we closed 8 prisons, okay? When we developed Divert Court, we decided several things that were more restorative than punitive. Number one, you didn't have to be indicted. Number two, you didn't have to file any plea papers. Number three, the case would be dismissed. And number four, the case would be expunged. Okay? That's treating drug addiction and alcoholism and sometimes mental health mixed in as a public health issue as opposed to a criminal justice issue. And so one of the things that we learned is that we did assessments of the person before they were put into the program, okay, so that we knew where they should go. The whole process of doing those assessments that I talked about beforehand that reduced technical violations by 59%, when you start changing judges and you start changing leadership and folks like me go away into private practice, those kinds of things start falling apart. So we need leadership to put them back together so that we understand who we're dealing with and we get the proper assessment, not just any old assessment, but a proper assessment, and we do the right thing by them on probation. The other thing that we have not talked about that is a promise that I'm going to make to this community, number one, anybody on the average misdemeanor case will not be placed on probation for 2 years, but for 180 days only, okay? Number two, anybody on a felony probation, presumptively, will be given no more than 2 to 5 years on probation. All this 10-year nonsense needs to go away. If you can make 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of probation, the only thing we're doing by putting you on probation for 10 years is collecting money from you. That is it.
That's true.
Okay? And so those are some of the things that come into play that I haven't had a chance. Mr. Miles, you haven't heard me talk about that yet. No, I got a lot of ideas, but you know, I got to answer the questions. But here, since I don't, you know, we get to do a little better here.
Okay.
So those are some of the things that I'm talking about that are more restorative than punitive.
All right, thank you, Judge Cruz.
You're welcome.
The next question is, will you commit to prosecute any police who wrongfully kill someone to the fullest extent of the law?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Judge Cruzo. And the next question is, what are your thoughts about having fully informed jurors?
What does that mean? I don't know what that means, fully informed. Wait, she's asking them. Is that your question? All right, come on up a little closer so I can hear you. Come on, get a microphone so everybody can hear you. Here. Oh.
Here you are.
You're getting ready to get me in trouble, I can tell.
What a fully informed juror is someone who knows their rights in that courtroom. One of our rights is to judge the law. That is in our state constitution. Article 1, Section 8, we are to judge the law as well as the facts. We have 15,000 laws a year being passed in this country by our legislators. 15,000 laws a year. You want to know why we've got so many criminals? It's because we've got too many laws. So what I want you to do is I want you to look up fija.org. It's the Fully Informed Jury Association. I started a courthouse outreach there just this past month. I got some pushback. We'll be there again Monday at the courthouse handing out these brochures. I'd like to give you one. I want you to be fully informed. Go in there, and is there a victim?
Can I get one right quick?
Is the law being applied? Is it just? I'll tell you what, I asked judges about this, and they said, no, we got to apply the law as given, and we take care of laws in the courtroom or in the legislature. That's not true. If that's true, then slavery laws would still be applied. So what we need to do is judge the law, and I want you to be fully informed that you have that capability to do that. We've got the world's largest prison population. We've got 120 penitentiaries right here in Texas. We've got to do something. I like what Judge Crusoe is saying. Here.
May I see what you have?
Sure, absolutely.
Because I don't.
I heard they're handing them out there.
Oh, okay.
I don't mean to hijack your...
Nah, don't worry about it.
Thank you for your input. Now, Judge Crusoe, the next audience question is, what can we do to assure that more wrongful convictions are investigated in Dallas County in the state of Texas?
Okay, so you have, let me go through this. So did the government prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused broke the law? I agree with that, okay? Is the law that was broken constitutional? Under certain circumstances, that can be given to the jury to decide not whether the law was constitutional, but whether the police agencies violated the constitutional rights of the individual. So to that extent, they are passing on constitutional rights, and I agree with that. Is the law that was broken just, and then in parentheses, and justly applied in the case at hand? I do not agree with that, okay, because that is too subjective, and I don't think that that is the law. I'll have to respectfully disagree with you. Was anyone harmed? Well, that may be the question in the case, whether or not they committed a crime, and if so, whether it was a harmful crime. So I agree that that should be an issue depending on the case. Was anyone's property harmed? It depends on the case and what the purpose of, what the facts of the case and the charge are. I agree that that's something that the jury should answer. Does the punishment fit the crime? Absolutely. That should be an issue that the jury should decide. Do other factors exist that would make strict enforcement of the law unjust in this case? That's called exculpatory or mitigating evidence. And I agree on the current law that that should be brought before the jury. In fact, if any judge doesn't allow that, the case will probably be reversed. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And our last question for this afternoon is, what can we do to assure that more wrongful convictions are investigated in Dallas County?
Well, I think what I said earlier is that we need to review the Conviction Integrity Unit, and we need to make sure that they're operating on best practices or whatever we can determine within resources that we can do to meet that. I know Mr. Miles is here, and he can probably, he has more opinions about that than I do because he works closely with the wrongfully convicted, him being one. You know, without being there and being on the inside, I know that Mr. Miles, you and Gary Udishin and others have tried to talk or have spoken to the district attorney. I know that she has added at least one or maybe two people to the staff, which is good, okay? I'm not going to take that away from her. But all of what I would do, I cannot answer that at this time because I don't have all of the evidence available to me, except that if it needs improvement, we're going to get on it right away.
Again, thank you for coming out.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So these candidates come out and they address our communities and they make us a lot of promises to secure our vote. But it's our responsibility to hold them accountable to these promises. And we have to hold promises to ourselves that we are going to hold them accountable. So I want you all to do me a favor and stand with me if you plan to vote in the upcoming district attorney race. I appreciate you.
I guess I better stand too.
Now I want you to stay standing if you plan to hold the next DA accountable to the promises they made in their campaign trail. I want you guys to look around the room because this is the community that gets this work done. I want you to remain standing as I thank John Crusoe for speaking with us today. Judge Crusoe, is there anything you would like to let us know as a community in your closing remarks?
No, I think that you all had very good questions. I think the ACLU questionnaire was great, okay? And I think the fact that we have an opportunity to have a forum like this and for you to hear from me is good. And there's nothing I said here that I don't believe in. I think, as I admitted, that I have perhaps not communicated as well as I should have. And I think on some issues, especially with Mr. Miles, I read that he pointed out, it sounded wrong, it looked wrong, but it wasn't what I meant. And so I'm glad we're taking the opportunity to talk about that today. Okay, I have made many mistakes in my life, and I'm sure I will continue to, and that's the purpose of this, is that if somebody's making a mistake or not going in the right direction, let's hear about it and let's get corrected when we need to do it. So, and the other thing is, let's not run the DA's office worrying about getting elected. Okay, I've had a lot of people talk to me about divert court when nobody would do it and all of these other programs and things that I did. Okay, and they were groundbreaking, and there wasn't everybody in favor. And you know why we got it done? Because I never worried about getting reelected. Okay, I always worried about doing the right thing. And if we focus on that, you might get reelected, you might not, but at least when you had the opportunity to do the right thing, you did it. That's what matters.
Thank you, Judge Cruzo. You all can sit. I want to invite the ACLU of Texas Executive Director, Terry Burke, up for a few minutes.
Dominic, you've done a wonderful job today. Most of all, I want to first thank the folks up here. Richard Miles, thank you. Chaz Rogers, we appreciate your contributions. These are members of our advisory board here in Dallas. Roderick Johnson, thank you so much. And Sharon Robbins, we're glad you were here too. Thank you. So let's all say thank you to them. Keisha Nixon, thank you for wrapping this up today. You did a good job. Judge Cruzo, we are grateful for you to be here. Of course, it wouldn't have been a forum without you. And I want to thank our staff. We have a number of folks here, and I won't name everybody. A lot of our Dallas staff. We have offices in 5 Texas cities: Houston, Dallas, Austin, Brownsville, and El Paso. And I think everybody on the staff has contributed to this event and the success that it is, particularly on this rainy day. So thank you, staff, and thank you, Dallas volunteers, for all that you did. We appreciate it. And then, of course, our partner organizations, some of whom were represented here today. Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, the Concerned Pastors, and the Red-Handed Warrior Society, Change with Action, and Texas Freedom Network. Thank you for your help in promoting this. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for being here. This shows your commitment to this, to learning more about this office that so few really understand is perhaps the most important public office in your county, in our state, because it has this office holds the power of our lives in its hands. So I'm glad you've taken the time to learn more about the issues, about our smart justice reform agenda. I want to remind you that we are nonpartisan, not endorsed. So I urge you not only to go to Judge Cruzo's website and learn more about him, I urge you to go to DA Faith Johnson's website, since she chose not to be here today despite repeated invitations. Go to her website and learn what she stands for. And then you can always go to dallasda.org, our website, and learn what the Smart Justice Reform Agenda is and what are the very essential issues to that. I heard on the radio coming from the airport that less than 5% of eligible North Texas voters vote. We saw that there were more than that in the primaries, and I hope we will see far more than that in the general election. See to it that your friends and your family members understand these issues. Drag them to the polls if you have to. And as they used to say, you know, vote early and often. But get folks to the polls. Let's get people out voting on something that is so important as this. And then, as several people have mentioned, when the election is over, whoever wins, they must be held accountable for all of these issues that will help us end this mass incarceration. Thanks again for being here today. Bye-bye.
So just to echo Terry's sentiments, I want to remind everybody this work does not stop here. I want to, again, invite you guys to engage with us on dallasda.org. Get involved with the smart justice work that we're doing here. I want to thank our panel, thank our advisory board members, all of our community partners. Thank you guys all for being here and proving that criminal justice is a priority for Dallas County. Thank you so much.